Hi, welcome to the CPD PowerPoint presentation from IRT Surveys. IRT have been trading now since January 2002, surveyed around 250,000 domestic properties, probably well over 200 university properties, a few hundred schools, and certainly dozens and dozens of office blocks up and down the country. We are the UK's largest infrared independent building surveyors, certainly in the world of infrared. We have raised venture capital, we've developed software, we've got about 10 or 11 offices around the country at the time of recording this presentation. So sit back, relax, and hopefully we will take you through this PowerPoint seamlessly and it will be of interest to you. Thank you. Let's begin with having a look at what IRT surveys have been doing for the last 15-16 years. We started off surveying flat roofs for defects to help clients identify sources of ingress and to help them proceed with optimized refurbishments. That very quickly grew into complete envelope surveys, so roofs, walls, windows, floors, etc. We then branched out into the housing sector, providing complete portfolio evaluations. Subsequently started writing our own software, mainly all market driven by our actual clients and trying to provide what they need to make intelligent decisions using enriched data to help unlock funding and actually accelerate the retrofit journey. Part of that process involves an audit where we can provide a really simple data set on a spreadsheet that just simply ranks and rates a portfolio, either domestic or commercial. In the United Kingdom at the moment, although there is a housing shortage, there are about 27 million homes in total, 4.5 million of which are in the social housing sector. We have surveyed around 250,000 of them, and what we've found from our surveys, which you can see modelled on the map, we have done length and breadth of the country in little pockets, but it roughly breaks into 3 separate equal-sized thirds, and it doesn't seem to matter if the buildings are old, new, terraced, social or otherwise. We always find 1/3 are what they say they are. We find 1/3 have no insulation and badly need measures, and we find 1/3 don't have what they think they have on paper. So our estimation is the market is roughly 2/3 of the market actually needs measures to improve them. The statistics along the bottom are the savings and the money we've managed to leverage into the sector to actually make improvements and help get people out of fuel poverty. Now, the challenge for any retrofit or refurbishment is, first of all, identifying the issues. What needs to be repaired or improved? How much is that investment going to cost? Will it provide a reasonable return on investment? Do your tenants and clients want it? Do they need it? Or is the motivation to mitigate risk from legislation, or to mitigate risk from flood damage or potential collapse? So it's actually quite a complicated issue, and it starts with identifying the issues. Now let's consider the actual retrofit audit process. Before you begin to do a refurbishment or a retrofit plan, you have to gather data. That again can be quite slow and painful, but it has to be accurate. You've got to go and physically gather that data. You then have to make sense of that data, and you've got to plan and spec the retrofit, appoint team to manage it, and it all takes time. And obviously at the end, to prove success, you have to measure that. You have to measure the start and end point to know that it was actually a valid, worthwhile process. A major problem we've identified with our clients is that of missing data and people simply not trusting the data they have. If you don't have solid data that's robust, that you can trust and rely on, It means you can't present that to funders. It means you can't build a solid business case. That means your assets are at risk. It means your business is at risk because there is legislation coming that says you must comply with the minimum energy performance standards. That affects long-term value of your assets and just has an overall detrimental effect. So for us, one of the main things you need to do, our advice would be address that data right at the start of the journey before you do anything. Now the big dilemma for you, of course, if you're sitting watching this and you're an RICS surveyor or you're an asset manager or an investment portfolio manager, that risk resides with you. You're the one that's taking advice from manufacturers, from contractors. You're making decisions and you're putting your trust and faith in those people that they're telling you the truth. But ultimately that professional risk is yours. So you have to ask yourself, are you comfortable? There are a few obvious solutions on the table for you to consider. First and foremost, you can gather data. Traditional methods involve obviously destructive testing. It involves appointing a professional surveyor, and you can wait weeks per building, which is okay if you only have one or two buildings. It's a big expensive problem if you have lots of buildings. A second option is to make assumptions. Assume that your EPC certificates are accurate, assume everything's okay, and just carry on as you are, or indeed do retrofits with those assumptions. Or the third option, and a lot of clients are adopting this one, is do nothing. Just bury your head in the sand and hope that the legislation goes away and that your buildings never leak. At IRT, we've got a fairly radical solution to this problem. Our survey process is incredibly fast. When you're looking at housing stock, each camera we have is manned by a two-man team, and each team is doing around 500 homes per evening. So it can be a very, very, very quick process. We then analyse that information, again, automatically through our bespoke software that we've written ourselves. That happens in our head office in Dundee, and we then hand back to our clients a prioritised data set that says impartially, here is a list of properties, it's the truth, it's where you are today, and here's how you could make improvements. And it has the impact of those improvements very clearly spelled out on the actual deliverable. The House Survey is an online interactive portal that allows both the public to see a two-page energy audit of their home and a portfolio manager to get an overview of his entire estate. And both the public and the asset manager can interact with their homes. This was developed with a grant from the ECCI in Edinburgh and fund matched by Aberdeen City Council. There are now about 250,000 homes hosted on this platform. The beauty of the platform and the whole aim is to actually engage the public using the system. So in Aberdeen's case, we had 7,500 houses on this platform. We created a unique property reference code for each individual house, and every single occupier was sent a letter saying, please visit this website and type in a code and you will see a free energy audit of your home. Rather surprisingly, almost 1/3 of those 7,500 people actually took action and came to that website and asked for help, which is quite staggering. There are now quite a few local authorities using this platform, and it's something that we're keen to get into the hands of housing associations and more local authorities. But please have a look at thehousesurvey.co.uk for more information on that one. It's really simple and it's all built into Google Earth as well. DREAM is the next evolution for IRT surveys. It stands for the Dynamic Retrofit Energy and Asset Management Software. Essentially, it's an online platform that allows you to drag and drop your asset register into the system, and receive a free traffic light analysis of your portfolio. So you'll get a very simple 13% of your data was missing. We've had to make some assumptions. 20% of your stock is non-compliant with today's legislation, and the remainder is in good shape. It exists as a software as a service product, so it's a monthly subscription. The beauty of what DREAM delivers for you, the client, is an automatic energy audit with automatic alerts. So every time energy prices fluctuate, DREAM is doing an analysis on your portfolio and flagging alerts to you to say this building is no longer compliant, or a retrofit is now required by legislation, or this property now meets your desired return on investment. You can do that on one house, you can do it on 10,000, you can do it on 50,000 houses, and it's a one simple monthly payment to keep you bang up to date with legislation and mitigate risk for your business. The key benefits to taking an IRT approach to portfolio evaluation is fairly clear. The impartiality is critical if you're going to do retrofits. You need to make sure that you are getting clear, honest advice. Using software and exploiting technology to actually deliver results means you free up staff to physically do the retrofits and get them doing other projects that perhaps bring in money rather than waste money thinking about doing things. Identifying quick wins is always a very clear benefit. If there's low-hanging fruit out there, software like DREAM, like the house survey, will actually identify them for you and allow you to make some really quick changes and hopefully leverage some funding into the process. You may be asking yourself, why does all this matter? Why should I do infrared surveys? Why should I use software? My portfolio is fine. Well, consider these 4 points on the screen in front of you. Business ultimately is about making money, whether we all like that or not. Your assets have a value. If you do nothing and stand by and let them fall into disrepair, or you miss out on funding, then that's just detrimental to business. It's bad practice. If you think about your tenants, your business will be smoother. Your tenants will be more happy to pay their rent if they're living in nice, safe, warm, comfortable homes. We all have a duty of care to our environment, to look after it and protect it. Legislation is providing major headaches for most businesses these days, but the aim's quite clear. We are trying to help save the planet here by incentivizing people to actually improve the built environment. That's why there are things like MEPs, like ESOS, like ECO, CESP, all these things of the past, Green Deal. They're all about improving the built environment and using legislation as a bit of a carrot and stick to ensure that people actually do care. The assets themselves, traditional retrofits are necessary, they are beneficial, and it's about protecting their long-term value. So why now? Why do a portfolio review and why use infrared? You need to mitigate risk from legislation and from the uncertainty that this rather volatile market has thrown up. The energy prices have gone up over 150% in the last 8 years, and that's a trend that's set to continue. Fuel poverty isn't going away anytime soon. There's nearly 2.5 million people living in fuel poverty today, which means they're spending more than 10% of their income on heating their buildings. And that's a little bit scandalous for the UK in 2016. But from a business point of view, there is money out there. There's quite a lot of money available out there. But if you don't understand your data and have a good grip on what you would like to do, you're definitely not going to attract any funding or be able to borrow money against your assets if you don't understand the condition of those assets. So it is vital that you understand literally where you are today in real terms and have a solid business plan that you can act upon with a known return on investment. Let's have a quick look at 3 projects that involve portfolio evaluation from IRT surveys. The first, Royal Holloway University, appointed us to look at 88 separate buildings for them, and the deliverable there was basically a ranked and rated spreadsheet that said there is the worst building you have, there's the worst element of it, and there's how much money, carbon and kilowatts you can save from replacing or upgrading each of those elements. So what that enabled the university to do was actually prioritise a retrofit programme. Now we've done similar projects for Bath University, Manchester Metropolitan, Edinburgh, UWE, Middlesex, Loughborough, Napier, St Andrews. It's a fairly common practice in that specific sector. For Edinburgh City Council we did a portfolio review exactly the same as Holloway's for 90 separate schools. In both projects, together with the actual overall spreadsheet analysis, with all the numerical analysis of retrofits, they actually received about a 50-page report on each building that detailed all the defects as well as the energy savings that could be delivered by doing a retrofit. Scottish Housing Federation, we managed to survey 60,000 homes from Orkney and Shetland right down to the Scottish borders and out to the Outer Hebrides. Urban, rural, new, old, didn't really make much difference. That was partially funded by the Scottish Government in phase 1. The first 10,000 were free to SFHA members. The following 50,000 were heavily subsidised by Sheffield Insulation, who very kindly sponsored the programme. That actually leveraged about 30 odd million pounds into those 60,000 homes, all built into an online platform called the Carbon Portal, where housing associations could actually share best practice and register what they did, what funding they got, how tenants reacted. It was a really fantastic project. Other issues we can identify, particularly in these housing examples, in the middle of your screen you're looking at condensation in blue and purple in a nursery. The bottom left you are looking at delaminating render in blue, which is very easy to see. It's sub £20 a house, provided we get volume. Above 500 houses, that sort of number, we can actually get the price down as low as that. But that means no scaffolding, no health and safety, no hammer tests, impartial advice, and you can literally see it in bright blue where we can say that is 4.2 square meters of delaminating render, and that's what you tender. On the right hand side of the screen you'll see an after image of external wall insulation. If you do a retrofit program and you do evaluate say 1,000 buildings and you go and employ someone to bolt EWI onto say 100 of those buildings, it's not a huge expense to say please go and do the infrared surveys again at the end. What you can see at the right there in red and yellow is actually moisture getting in at the corners of that building and soaking into the insulation. Now that building's only 3 months post install, so that's the kind of thing you can avoid and identify whilst you're in the defect liability period and get repaired at the contractor's expense. So while it's a small cheap defect, get it addressed, saves the contractor money in the long term, but ultimately saves your assets and saves the tenant complaining about a cold damp house in say 9 months time when it's all saturated. So let's consider a full portfolio analysis. What does that process look like? Right at the start of the process for us, it's about gathering data, either via you exporting a CSV file from your current asset register or emailing an Excel spreadsheet. Doesn't really matter for us. What we do is we take that data as best as you've got it, we fill in the blanks with our dynamic templates, and we start with a decent data set. We then process that through our software, which is a desktop review, and we can actually report back to you and say, okay, this is where we think you are based on what you've uploaded and what we've assumed. You can then interact with that data and start playing around with it. Then identify priority buildings from that analysis and reporting and say, do you know what, we are concerned about this 10% or this 80%, or we're concerned about these 3 houses. Please go and gather more data. That's when we deploy one of our survey teams to physically go and gather data on site. We then take that data and augment it right back into step 1 of that process. And it's a fairly iterative process of that again and again until you've got the perfect data set. Does that exist? Is that a dream? I don't know, but it's certainly best practice, and it's a blooming good start if you're going on a retrofit journey to establish exactly where you are and what the destination should be, and to plan the most efficient route to get from A to B. We have a fairly flat, simple pricing structure for most of our survey processes. Infrared surveys we charge at £1,200 a day for site time and £650 for office time. So typically, if you said survey a roof of a primary school, we might be £1,850. If you said do roof and walls, we might be £2,500. Turn it into a high school, we might be closer to £3,500. But turn it into a portfolio evaluation and the prices come dramatically down because there's a really good economy of scale, provided the portfolio is quite densely located. For software, as the example that's on your screen for DREAM, we have 3 different service levels, basically small, medium and large, but renamed Light, Pro and Big. Light is aimed at the private rented sector, where it's £1 per month per home, so it's fairly inexpensive. It's data only, but you can interact with your stock and you can get alerts, and we also match you to providers who have special offers. So say for instance if you own 20 separate flats, you'd like to consider replacing the boilers. If at any given time whilst your data is hosted with us, if British Gas have a promotion on boilers, we can actually put you in touch and say, hey look, you might be able to get 50% funding or get 20 free boilers here. A little bit different if you move on to housing stock. If you've got 10 or 20,000 houses, it's £1,500 a month. For that you get 500 infrared surveys as well. You don't need a huge amount of training because it is a fairly simplistic system to use, but you're getting automatic energy audits and you're getting alerts every time there are changes. For larger housing providers, the fee's slightly higher. There's no onboarding fee, so there's no fee to actually create it. And we also give you a consultancy service as well, where we can help advise what you could do and what options are out there for you.